worse things out tonight than vampires.
Like what?
Like me.
Greetings, fanboys and fangirls, I'm Erod and I'm the Blockbuster Buster. Let me once again take you back in time, when vampires weren't a bunch of whiny, sparkly, pasty-faced pansies. Unfortunately, this is also a time when comic book movies were not very good. So let me tell you about a film that simultaneously made vampires awesome and started that comic book movie boom that we are enjoying today. Blade. Now, I'll go ahead and say that when I first heard that they were making a Blade movie, I was not thrilled. The original Blade from the comics was not that great of a character. He was this jazz musician who lived on the streets of New Orleans and fought vampires with tiny butter knives. And on top of things, he was a bit of an embarrassing black stereotype. Not as bad as the original Luke Cage, but embarrassing nonetheless. While some might claim that they improved the character in the 90s, in my humble opinion, he was still a D-list character. And his guest spot in the 90s Spider-Man cartoon didn't help improve his overall image. In the Spidey episode, Blade's motorcycle climbs walls, and he fights vampires with a lightsaber. Yeah, probably not the best character to adapt for a Saturday morning cartoon. My perception of Blade changed in an instant the second that I saw the trailer to this movie. Whoa, now that is not your daddy's Blade. The plot. Vampire misfit Deacon Frost has figured out a way to awaken La Magra, the vampire blood god. The only one standing in his way is Blade, the vampire hunter, the daywalker, whose mother was bitten by a vampire while she was pregnant. And thus, Blade was born with all the strengths of a vampire and none of their weaknesses, except for the thirst.
You're one of them, aren't you?
No. I'm something else.
Favorite character. This movie has a great cast. None other than Udo Kier plays Dragon Eddie, the leader of the Vampire Council. Now that's just great. And Busha Wright plays Dr. Karen Jensen, who is saved by Blade early in the movie from vampire attack. One would assume that she would be Blade's love interest, but the movie never takes that route, cause it doesn't need to. Not every movie needs a romantic subplot.
You seem a bit tense, a bit pent up, maybe. Like you need to release something. No? Blade not giving it to you, man?
Karen is the audience surrogate, there to facilitate the exposition. You learn about vampires and how they work in Blade's universe through her and her experience of being attacked by a vampire and slowly turning into one.
Buy yourself a gun. You start getting sensitive to daylight. You find you're thirsty, regardless of how much you had to drink. I suggest you take that gun and use it on yourself.
Karen never lets you forget the gravity of the situation, and she brings a more level-headed and compassionate point of view into Blade's harsh world of vampire hunting.
You better wake up. The world you live in is just a sugar-coated topping. There is another world beneath it, the real world. And if you want to survive it, you better learn to pull the trigger.
But don't worry, folks, it's not all action and drama, as one of my all-time favorite actors, Donald Logg, provides plenty of comic relief, as Quinn, Deacon Frost's main henchman. Quinn is your standard weaselly bastard. I love how every time he and Blade cross paths, he mutilates him in a new and hilarious way. Steven Dorff is perfect as Deacon Frost. He is very much the snarky, spoiled douchebag who needs to have the taste slapped out of his mouth.
Shout.
Not to mention, Deacon has the uncanny ability to stick the word fuck into nearly any sentence.
Have the good grace to die with some fucking dignity back in my fucking thing. One big happy fucking family. Very fucking thirsty.
Did you know that originally, at the end of the film, Deacon was supposed to use the power of La Magra to turn himself into some kind of a CG blood hurricane? But test audiences hated that ending, as the audience had become attached to Deacon Frost, and they felt that him disappearing for the final act was bullshit. So they went back and shot a new climax, which ended up becoming one of the greatest scenes in the movie. So, they decided not to replace one of the protagonists with stupid CG bullshit for the final act? Huh, the producers of Van Helsing should have been taking some fucking notes! Now, as I said earlier, this version of Blade is very different from the one in the original comics. Wesley Snipes saw the opportunity to make the character his own and seized it. This is his version of Blade, and no one can replicate it. No one! Apparently, Wesley Snipes tried for years to get a Black Panther movie off the ground, with him playing the titular character. With Black Panther stuck in development hell, the second that Wesley was offered the opportunity to bring another prominent black comic book character to life, He went for it, not just providing his talent as an actor and a martial artist, but he also contributed a few ideas for the character and for a few of his signature weapons. Through Wesley Snipes, Blade dropped all the embarrassing stereotypes and became a slightly better rounded character. He's more of a Ronin, a masterless samurai, a gunslinger, going from town to town taking out as many vampires as possible. Privately, he was haunted by the death of his mother, and hoped to one day dust the vampire that killed her. But that's not his main drive. Not every movie needs a revenge subplot. Like I said, his anguish is played subtly, as every time he looks in the mirror, he sees the monster that killed his mother. Cause even though Blade is the daywalker, he's still part vampire. Blade wasn't a wisecracking smartass. He didn't have to say a funny line every time he staked a vampire. His humor, again, was subtle. It came through his demeanor and swagger.
Oh, great, now you robbing me. You gonna rob me too?
How do you think that we fund this organization, huh? We're not exactly the March of Dimes. It's fake.
And while it might be silly to wear sunglasses at night, Wesley pulls it off nicely. With all that said, my favorite character is still Abraham Whistler, played by Chris Christopherson. Whistler is Blade's surrogate father, his mentor and weapons maker.
Still heavy.
You're so big.
Interesting fact, Whistler is not a character from the comics. He was created for that lackluster episode of Spider-Man, which goes to show that something good can come out of something bad. Cause Whistler kicks ass. He's my favorite cause he reminds me of my grandpa. He's just a tough old codger who tells it like it is, and has no patience for namby-pamby bullshit.
Catch you fuckers at a bad time?
Favorite scene. This movie has some kick-ass merciless action sequences, all of which culminates with the aforementioned sword fight, which is one of the best I've ever seen. But my favorite scene is actually the opening scene, right after the cold opening, which sees none other than porn star Tracy Lords lead some poor helpless horny moron into a club full of vampires. Lucky for him, the Daywalker also decided to go clubbing that same night. This is one of my all-time favorite opening scenes, for a lot of reasons. For starters, that moment when Blade draws a shotgun and fires, to me, it symbolizes him firing the first shot of the comic book movie boom. No more of the corny, nonsensical, condescending crap of the early 90s. Comic book movies were going to be awesome, and smart, and hip. You get this badass opening action sequence, which simultaneously lays down a lot of the exposition. Vampires are real. Blade hunts them. The vampires fear him. He knows how to kill them. They're vulnerable to silver. To vampires, Blade is a slasher killer. And most important of all, Quinn is a schmuck.
I'm getting a little tired of chopping you up. Thought I might try fire for a change. Give my regards to Frost.
Favorite line. Nearly anything that Chris Christopherson says is always a gem.
What is this? Smells like a vampire wiped his ass with it.
But I'm gonna give this one to Wesley.
Some motherfuckers are always trying to ice skate uphill.
Final verdict. This movie is a milestone. It made a star out of a relatively unknown character. Not only was the comic book version changed to resemble the movie version, but Blade was included as a playable character in the Marvel Ultimate Alliance video games, alongside more popular Marvel staples like Captain America, Wolverine, and Spider-Man. This film laid the foundation for the X-Men and Spider-Man movies, the three of which paved the way for the rest of the great comic book films that we have now. Without them, we wouldn't have The Dark Knight or The Avengers, and I love how it all started with an obscure black character, which shows how progressively the landscape of the entertainment industry has changed. This is it, fanboys and fangirls. This is the moment when the landscape of cinema began to change, and we started to take over. Movies made by the fans, for the fans. Blade will forever be one of those films that combines nearly everything that I love. Comics, the paranormal, horror, martial arts, swordplay, cool gadgets, and a badass character. It pains me that the series ended so badly. And no, I'm not a fan of the TV series. I'm not saying that it's bad. All I'm saying is that I'm not a fan of Blade. I'm a fan of Wesley Snipes' version of Blade. That's the one that I like. So please, respect that. If you think the show is awesome, all the power to you. What's the difference between the Blade in the TV series and the Blade in the movies? He makes this look good. 10 points on the badassitude meter. Gather up your silver and give it a watch. And if you dig it, stick around, cause next week...
Hey, kid!
Blade is back, suckers! Join the Legion, suckers!
Ask you one more time. Where's the entrance?
Okay, look. It's in the freezer.